Hello and welcome to another podcast of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rocky here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, in today's episode, I want to talk about something that's a little bit more specific to my life and where I'm at. And the examples are kind of anecdotal. So I know I don't have hard data about how many people this applies to, but I get a feeling that this is probably a universal thing that people go through, at least fathers go through. And if that's all right with you, I kind of want to just dive into this. This might be one of these Joe's crazy type episodes, just as disclosure, but it's something that I certainly have experienced here and think that other guys have gone through it as well. So as we've discussed in the macro perspective that I now have a son, he's not the first baby, toddler, or infant I've ever encountered in my life. I have a number of nephews, nieces, cousins, whatever the term is for some of them. I'm not really good at that stuff, as you can tell. But long story short, my interaction with all of them really has been bring energy to the table, play. Let's go have fun. I've always been that uncle, or however you want to describe it. And the thing that I have noticed, it really started when Teresa began showing when she was pregnant, was that random people, typically women, would go, "Oh, you guys have so much courage for having a baby now." And I just always assumed that as being telling Teresa that she's going through something that's physically changing, I can see, and that's scary. I mean, that's what I was feeling at the time, and kind of think that's what they meant at the time. But now having Joseph and have him now at a time where he's actually able to do some stuff, I can throw him in the air, he can eat, he's starting to babble and all of this. What I'm finding is that near universally, when I'm doing stuff that I know will help him in the long run, stuff like making sure that he isn't going to choke, but by doing it in a way that trusts him. So if he starts gagging, I effectively look and say, I have two options. I can deal with this situation of him gagging. I can run in and immediately take whatever's bothering him out of his mouth, or I can let him figure it out. And the long story short is that by letting him figure it out, he has now learned how to eat and spit up. And if it does come to a problem, he actually lets me know. But most of the time, he's able to take care of it himself, which as a father is what I want, because whenever he's sitting in school, I don't want to be coming to his kindergarten and making sure he's able to eat lunch. That just is not what we're going for here. So I use that as an example of one of many that I could, that I am doing something that is what I believe is in the best long-term interest of him, my son. And it's at times has me trust him. I am trusting that he's going to internally learn how to not choke. I think it's a very safe bet, given the fact that all of us did it inevitably at one point. It's a human nature thing, but it's still an element of trust, no matter how you cut it. Whether it be me throwing him in the air to calm him down, or to give him just flat out joy, because he loves it. But he also lets me know when he's done. He has his own way of telling me. And what I have found is when I go through one of this, near universally, and it doesn't matter the woman's age, whether she's my mom, literally, women who are in their 20s, women who are in their 80s at church, that there's an implicit, I am going to do something wrong and hurt my child, as if I have never done this before. There's absolutely no faith that I can take care of him. And when there are other fathers around, I basically get one of two reactions. Either, oh, I remember getting yelled at all the time when my kid was that age, and you just got to deal with it. And then they kind of have this look of fondly remembering that in their eyes. Or the other group that yells at me with almost an envy that I am doing this. And that's how I've been seeing the reaction from other fathers coming at me. But the one thing that I have noticed, and I've even said this, was if I was at a business and I was doing everything that was required to make the product correct, and half of the population at this business yelled at me, told me I was doing it wrong, and showed absolutely no faith in me for doing the process that is making a correct result, I would not stay at that business. There's not a chance in the world I would. But it's almost universal that I'm getting this thrown at me as being a father, which I do not believe it's right for me to leave that business translation, being involved in my son's life. So again, this entire thing could be anecdotal. I could be completely in my own headspace and it's just, Joe, you're crazy. You are throwing your kid too high in the air. You are doing everything wrong. I just don't believe that to be the case, because the results are proving to be what we want, or at least what we want our children to be. And it's not a calling out any individual. It's a gender to gender thing of what I found out. And it is incredibly wearing. It's flat out annoying, and it gives essentially no trust to either myself or my relationship that I have with my son here. And it's bothersome in a lot of ways. And I know there's a lot I'm trying to say here, but I think that you understand where I'm at least to some degree. So before I keep talking forever about how I'm not happy with it, I want to let you tell me your thoughts as a professional of dealing with people in a spiritual place and how to help.
Well, I'm first wondering if Teresa is going to listen to this podcast. I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable for.
She already knows all this.
Whoever,
I don't really hold anything from her.
And stepping into the middle of that dynamic, I'm a little nervous about all that. And I'm not an expert about raising babies. I didn't raise my own. I'm the youngest, and I'm very happy for the people who know what they're doing to be doing that. So I'll just offer some thoughts that I've picked up from. I've loved a lot of people who have raised babies, and actually our Institute for Ministry Formation is pretty heavily invested in catechesis of the Good Shepherd now. So I have 2 women I work with who have a toddler and like ages 3 to 12 religious formation that catechesis of the Good Shepherd provides. So I pick up quite a bit, and I'm always learning. I'm always trying to listen in for things. So I'll just offer a few thoughts about some of what's happening, plus my knowledge of men and women and some of those differences, which is something that you're bringing out there, that men and women handle these things differently. So I'll say, you didn't say this, so I feel safe in approaching it from this angle because it's something I know about and maybe is obvious, but it comes to mind. There was a time when the going wisdom was, when your baby is crying, you let him cry it out. And now it seems that that's probably a bad idea, because you actually end up invalidating the baby's feelings and are really letting the baby know that, the world doesn't care if you exist or not. There are a number of things that start to get into that space, how that's handled, and there are some things that parents do that are really more about fortifying their own convenience than actually taking care of the child in the best possible way. And the child sleeping through the night because you locked him in a room and you let him cry it out may be better for you in the end. But these are the people I work with now, 25 years later, who are still working through the wounds of feeling like they're not worth attending to, even in their most helpless state. Because actually, babies don't just cry because they're being whatever manipulative and they want to turn you into something else. They're crying because they actually need something, and maybe it's just a little bit of attention, affection. So anyway, I don't want to make it overly simplistic, because I know that it's there are some nuances there, but there's a certain extreme, and that's the point that I want to make, and that extreme can be embraced because it is more convenient, for me, and so sometimes and this is where I'll get into a little bit of the male-female difference. So women, and whenever we're talking about male and female, you have to talk about sort of major categories. 80% of it's like on average, men are 15% larger than women, period. That's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some women that are larger than some men, so you have to sort of take these comments in that space of there being exceptions. But primarily, the sensitivity that women have is really suited to the earliest years of a child's life, when they have a lot of needs that they can't communicate clearly and that they're not even necessarily aware of. And women tend to be better positioned, sort of better made than men for those earliest years. And on the other hand, there's a way that men, maybe in their insensitivity, we might say, but I say that in a positive way, that we can kind of push through some things, and we don't have to, cross every T and dot every I, but we have a longer range in sight. So sometimes I think of it like, if you have a caravan, the the man is sitting at the front and has his eyes on the horizon where you're driving that thing, and the woman is inside and taking care of the needs of the family as you're moving it along. And that's where the complementarity of male and female is so beautiful. That men do tend to have a vision and drive forward and reach a goal, and that's really necessary. But women are making sure that there aren't sort of casualties in the process, and making sure everybody's fed, and
Mhm.
nobody's sick, and that's part of the complementarity that's really valuable there. And so men especially are really necessary as children get older, and they're able to be to kind of drive them forward, and look at, set their sights on the horizon as well, and help them to really mature into adulthood. And so the some of the balances that women are a little bit more the major in the earliest years, and men supportive. Men would tend to be a little bit more major in the later years, with women supportive.
Yeah, and I
Again, sort
certainly.
of.
Oh, sorry. I'm certainly experiencing that. It seems that as I'm looking at things in the long run, and it's not necessarily because, again, I'm trying to manipulate it so I don't need to do as much. It's so he can be self-sufficient, and I think that's part of the main goal of mine, is to make him self-sufficient for society. And her mindset is almost always make today, or make this second, as painless as possible for him. And that's where these conflicts are coming from, is that, in the long run, I need him to one day be able to learn how to put a band-aid on his own knee when he cuts himself up, not have me have to run in and fix it for him. And that's certainly an essence of what's going on here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so there are different questions about, like, how early is early enough for that to happen. And then I tend to use self-sufficiency as a bad word, because I find that in the realm that I work with, in terms of people's spiritual lives, self-sufficiency is a kind of independence that's problematic, that's unwilling to let anyone help, or not convinced that anybody will help. But ultimately, we're not made for self-sufficiency. We're made for relationship.
Hmm.
Now, I know where you're coming from, and you want to help him to grow into what he is capable of. And so you want to form those skills in him, and help him to see that he can, take on some of the difficulties, and he can work through those. Because in order to be in relationship, we also have to have something to offer. And that something to offer is going to be from our own gifts and talents that get developed, and like swallowing and
Hmm.
eating
Yeah.
your own food. And so that but we want to then be able to bring that into relationships. So part of the balance that you're striking is, I want my son to do his best, but I also want him to know that I'm always there for him. I
Hmm.
want him to succeed, but I also want him to know that he's unconditionally loved even when he fails. Right. And that's the balance that you're striking. And probably both you and Teresa are going to be pushing on that in different ways. And that's one of the value of there being two of you. So when you really push him, and then he starts to develop this idea, like, oh, my dad only, he just wants me to, like, get everything right. And then Teresa's there to pick up the pieces, and he can run to her, and she can help him with that, and vice versa. The opposite will also happen. And that's the sort of good cop, bad cop dynamic that you can maintain. So you're double teaming your child, so that he can do both things: develop as much as possible, but also know that he is unconditionally loved. And so, anyway, some of the things that get involved.
Yeah, and that's certainly, like I said, it's something that I'm experiencing here. The bigger challenge I have is the outside people constantly just looking at me, sometimes audibly gasping, and essentially just directly or indirectly saying I'm doing it wrong. And as someone who has done a lot of things right, it's very hard to take that on, let alone what feels like continuously anytime that I'm out in public. And it just, like I said, if this were a company, I would not come back to that company. It's very wearisome, and it really has picked up and amplified since he has become more capable and we can do more things together. And it's I don't think I'm the first person who's ever gone through these types of experience or feelings. That it's just I don't want to deal with this part of life anymore. And again, if it was a business, I'd be gone. That would have been my answer, because there's too much of it from a society around me to be able to change. All I can do is really out, and that's a challenge that I'm feeling. It's weighing on me, and I don't really know how to deal with that.
Do you have a sense that that's going to be unchanging, or as you prove yourself that your son hasn't smashed on the sidewalk or something like that, and hasn't choked to death, and there is
I don't have an answer to that.
My sense would be, and that we tend to, when there is that kind of criticism from the outside, or sort of suspiciousness. Now, as you're expressing, which I really appreciate, it is kind of suffocating, and it can undermine your confidence. And it's like, well, I just, like, can you give me a chance? I mean, so on the other hand, I think it can be helpful in really testing our confidence in terms of, like, well, if you know you're doing the right thing, then just keep doing the right thing. And the testing that's coming from the outside is making you ask the question, reevaluate, and maybe you make an adjustment, but maybe you keep doing the right thing. And it's like, well, this is the right thing, so you can deal with it. But
well, fair enough, because that's I look at the results to tell me if I'm doing the right thing. He has no anxiety that I can tell of whatsoever. He's not, I've seen kids that are live in fear or whatever. He has none of that. He has no tension in his life. He's happy as can be, and all of that, and he's progressing so that we can leave him at someone else's house, let him sleep overnight, and I don't have to worry about him choking out and him not being there when I come back. Like, that is an important learning thing. I think it's important for me as a parent, if I ever want to have someone else watch him, you don't let someone borrow a car that's going to blow up. I know that this is a lot more complicated than that. It's a relationship, but there is an element of what I'm trying to say there that I hope makes sense.
Well, yeah, and as I say, some of the emotional dimensions may not be obvious, that this isn't something that you can evaluate this quickly. So some of those emotional dimensions may not emerge for a number of years, that the way that you treated him. But I think for the most part, helping a child to take those things seriously. But I think children want to achieve, and they want to be helped to do that. And so it sounds like you're doing that. You're not just ignoring him, and you're encouraging him, and you're helping him. And so, those sound like good things to me. And the stakes are high, and so the criticism, or the outside evaluation of it is appropriate. I mean, I'm glad that the people around you care enough to comment, and hopefully your approach is bearing out. And again, I think it's important that you're aligned with your wife on that too, even though she may push in the moment because her maternal instincts kick in, and she tries to push for something else. As long as you're basically aligned, then there are a lot of things that there's a lot of parenting that is going to be particular to the parents. These things are not taught de fide in revealed by God and sacred scripture and things like that. And there are multiple approaches that can be successful. But if the parents are aligned, that should be the support that you need. And you push forward. You always test your motives and make sure that it's really for the good of the child and not a kind of covered up, way of promoting your own good in the midst of it, or being, cleverly negligent or something like that. And because all that stuff has happened too. I mean, parents trying to make it easier on themselves, which is not evil as such, but can lead to some problems. So.
Well, I mean, to be honest, there is part of it that's make it easier for her. I mean, we have really obvious change our sleep schedules than what it was 2 years ago before she got pregnant, and there is a certain sense that I have of just trust him. Like, not every single noise he makes means that there's going to be a problem, especially now that he's trying to learn how to talk. He just babbles stuff, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to wake up and have the monitor on the loudest possible thing so it instantly wakes everything up. It can be, we'll hear him through the wall if there's really a problem. And he's very good at letting us do that. And that's something that comes across as like, I don't care about him or anything like that. It's like, no, I care about you. If you don't sleep, everything gets worse. That's true for every person on this planet. Some people think they can live on 4 hours of sleep. You really can't. You can do it for a little bit. You can do it for a short-term sprint, but you cannot do it as a lifestyle. And that's part of this getting in it too. And I think it goes back to what you're saying about the long-term vision, that she just wants to deal with today. And if it means that tomorrow will be worse, that's better for her. But you can't win if you're only putting out today's fires. You need to have a vision for the future. And part of that to me is trusting him. I get that he can't talk, he can't walk, and he's dependent upon us in so many ways, but it doesn't mean you can't trust him. And I think that notion is somehow foreign and tries to make people think that I'm doing things wrong. And I don't know. To me, that's the starting of any relationship is trusting each other and all of that. And I do think in general, Teresa and I are on the same page with a lot of things, but it's almost like sleeping underneath a weighted blanket. It's not going away, and it's going to keep being there. I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and like I say, I think the being able to work that out with her is really critical, and so there's a good dialogue that's there. I think also, just to abstract one degree, and this question about parenting and wisdom in parenting, we live in a little bit of a weird time that families have become so disconnected, so that wisdom is largely not passed down in ways that it was in the past, and maybe for better and maybe for worse. Maybe there are some improvements on what our own parents, grandparents, great grandparents did, but I just note that we lose track of that. People aren't learning to parent from their parents as much anymore, and sometimes there's a reaction formation. But so it's an interesting time that complexity is added in. I will mention there's another podcast called Messy Parenting, and I think it's messyparenting.com, and then they formed the Messy Family Project. But Mike and Alicia Hernan are lovely people, and are offering. And I haven't listened to all the podcasts, but the ones I heard were doing a good job of not dogmatizing their own approach. And they said part of the reason when they started parenting, there were people that said, you absolutely cannot do this. Whatever you do, don't do this. And the next person they talked to said, you absolutely must do this. Whatever you do, you must do this. And they're like, okay, they're not both right.
No.
and so there's something in there. And so I, at least what I've experienced of them, they're pretty good at just sort of putting things out there. These are things that we've learned. These are things that have happened. These are things that we've done wrong. And these are things that we've seen. And, just sort of talking through what all of that looks like. But it's anyway, it's an interesting time. And, at the end of the day, if there were there are a number of reasons that there isn't going to be a single optimal answer. One is that every child is unique.
Mhm.
And so every child is going to be, you need a bit of a unique approach. Every set of parents are unique and have their own strengths and weaknesses. You're a marvelous person in your capacity to really set goals and achieve them, and to work through hard things, and to make sacrifices. And you have a certain confidence and peacefulness in yourself that you can endure a level of pain and even other people's pain without sort of setting off all kinds of alarms, and you're able to carry through in a steady way. And so every set of parents are going to be unique, and so there isn't going to be an optimal way. And then societal factors matter, as much as we can be a little bit countercultural, or we can go with the flow. The fact that you're raising children in 21st century America makes a difference. Your son is
Mhm.
going to have to deal with the stuff of our world. He's not going to deal with the stuff of the Middle Ages. And so
Mhm.
we can't just resurrect medieval parenting practices and say, well, they were the best, when Thomas Aquinas grew up, the way that he was raised, that's the best. So not that there isn't wisdom there to learn from, not that there aren't truths, perennial truths about the human person that we can't learn from, but all of it's going to it's necessarily going to grow. And in our time, we have, some benefits um, of psychology, of childhood development. We've gotten some insights and have been able to communicate that in a way that we can draw from. Like I said, I love the catechesis of the Good Shepherd, because that, building on the Montessori model, really takes into account developmental, general developmental patterns of the child that you wouldn't necessarily know if you weren't looking at something that were studied. You recognize it once you see it, but you might not have picked it up on your own. So
Mhm.
there is some of that wisdom that's around as well that we can keep growing from. But it's a great challenge. I give you so much credit. That's the way you started off this podcast. It's a great challenge to raise a whole human being, and um, that's an infinite value. Your son has an infinite value, and that God loved you and trusted you enough to entrust that infinite human being to you is something really beautiful.
Yes, yes, it is. It's something that is. This is the part of the challenge I never really expected. Not to go off on my own thing, but I I created a business from scratch and had it live over a decade. That's something that's virtually impossible to do, especially through COVID. And you know, I've never dropped a kid. Every one of those nieces and nephews, as soon as they get out of the car, they basically run to find me. I mean, clearly I'm doing something right, yet every single person around me, whether they know me or not, all have this instinctually look that I am doing something wrong just because I'm bringing energy to the table, or maybe just because I'm a guy, period. And like I said, it's something that I might be the only person going through this, but I highly doubt that. And whatever element that is of the human nature that makes people instinctually try to shoot down me trying to be with my kid and other kids in general, I guess, that clearly is showing results. I mean, some of these kids are 16 now. There's clearly something I've done right. So to have this universal assumption that everything I'm doing wrong is, I guess that's the part that's being very worrisome, and it just being like, I want to build this differently, but I can't build society by myself. And basically any person who's ever tried doing that in world history has turned out really bad. But that's a side story within itself. So
But
I
don't
think
give up. Keep going.
I'm not, but I wanted to put that out there because I'm sure that there's some other guy, some other father who is experiencing this in some capacity, or in the future will listen to this and experience and know that it's as you're saying here, it will not last forever. This too shall pass. So I thank you for that, Father. Use that as the note of today, ending today's episode, and we'll be with everyone again here next week.